All right, darlings, coming into the home stretch of this year's 2013 New Humanity Alchemy event here in Los Angeles. Want to thank everybody who is with us during the streaming. Want to thank all of those that have sat into this intensive. Incredible. So it's a fantastic event because there has been so much trying to give you information to help you be sovereign, to help you be solid, to give you the opportunity to use your body technology. There's external technology, but what about your body? We just had an incredible talk about the power of the mind and just bringing it forth. Well, now, here is a lovely genie by the name of Jerry Avalos, who is here to talk about, lucid dreaming. And that maybe it has military applications, which is absolutely fascinating. But what he did as a young man is he recognized his intuitive gifts, and he started to harness them, being able to travel out of his body, being able to see and do amazing things. He's going to share those experiences with you today because the answer is with you, the answer is in you, and he's going to talk about his experiences and help spark you in understanding lucid dreaming, military applications, and maybe even defending against such things as my labs and all the wild things that you've experienced. Please join me in a lovely warm applause for Jerry Avalos.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for an awesome introduction, too. Thank you. That's great. Yes, my name is Jerry, and I'm a natural-born lucid dreamer. And when I say that, I delved more into the intuitive applications of lucid dreaming, not just the psychological, analytical aspect of it. So this goes well beyond Jungian psychology. It was a big part of it, trust me, understanding the subconscious communication, how our symbols are relayed to us is a huge part of it. But there is more application to that, especially for those, I'm sure there's many in this room, or at least some in this room, who've experienced precognitive dreams and visions, things like this. And we'll know that these aren't simply subconscious calculations all the time. And so if we recognize we have these things spontaneously, it's like, I think all of us here have begged the question. It's like, does anyone study this with any earnest, sincere intention of application? And yes, there is. And you see stuff in the public sector as well as the private, and obviously the military too. Now for myself, just a little bit about my background for those who may have not ran into any of my talks online or other interviews. Being that natural, intuitive, lucid dreamer, there's elements within the government who will abduct you out of nowhere and utilize your abilities without you knowing. This does get into MK Ultra programs, super soldier programs, things like that. Now apparently, from my experience, I recognized that there was a point where I was entangled with Edwards Air Force Base and probably some of the electronic warfare divisions that went on over there. Now, was I ever officially in the military? No, I was not. Did they ever let me necessarily know officially this was going on? What you do is you have memories that last with you of different bases, different buildings that, seemingly correlate to different researchers and whistleblowers like Stephen and Jordan Maxwell, that they'll talk about these establishments. You'll be like, oh yeah. And then if you go down this way and that way, you find this and that. And then it's, being a guy who grew up in Southern California, that's not something I normally do is, walk up to Space Command and ask them how they're doing as far as I thought in my conscious life. But however, I thought in this dream world, I was playing this quote unquote game, which I thought it was, but ultimately it did tie into these different programs. Utilization of American citizens without our knowledge. And as we know, the government does like to test things on us. We all know about things like Agent Orange and DDT and aspartame and fluoride. So what makes us think it's anything different with any attributes that they might be able to exploit? And that's just a little bit about my background. And I know the subject of psychic function in general sometimes is very nebulous for a lot of people. There's not much science attached to it. But this is one of the things I want to talk about today is how that, yes, there's very hard science to it. And yeah, it's not necessarily nebulous, and it's predictable and repeatable. And one of the first demonstrations I like using is point to this man, Dean Radin, at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in Petaluma, California. Now, he's worked with a lot of very esteemed colleges, including Harvard, looking at different psychological studies as well as parapsychology. does amazing meta-analysis of various studies relating to telepathy, various ESP kind of responses. And so I grabbed a couple of stills from one of his talks, which is Google's Tech Talk, The Taboo of Psi. I highly recommend you watch this and check it out if you haven't seen it. This is bar none one of the best empirical summaries of psychic function out there. Okay? And in this study, you can see what happened was this is a stimulus test that they did with the sender and receiver. So this person would be the sender, and this one would be the receiver. Now, they're not in the same room. We have someone, the receiver is sitting there with white noise over their ears and in front of them. And meanwhile, the sender is getting stimulus via images, pretty much for I forgot the name of it, but it's the nationally recognized group of pictures that elicit XYZ responses. So they'd be sit there in terms of their testing methods, all using the current testing methods. And what we'll see here is we see a correlation between the brain activity and the sending and receiving based on the time, and we're going in milliseconds here. And so what's really interesting about things like these tests, and why I brought this one out in particular, is because not only does it demonstrate some kind of information exchange, but also during the test, if you review the methods, you're seeing that it's also implying precognitive perception, because you'll see spikes in the responses that are going to be more emotionally charged. You'll see a greater increase from the time they push the button. 1 second, image comes on. In that time of that 1 second from the time they push the button to when the stimulus comes on, you'll see a different response, pre-response to the actual physical response, correlating to the imagery that's going to be shown. And so this is one of the tests that was done. You can see on the bottom, this is Mario Kitney's at University of Edinburgh in 2004. This is where that study came from. That was, and just real quick, that was 15 different couples that they used, because one thing that is commonly known, and we'll get more into this later, is that the closer your associations or your bonding is with a certain partner, the more channels are going to be open, the more conductivity there's going to be for information exchange. And this is what's interesting to me too. These are real scientists. We got professor of statistics at UC Davis, Jessica Utz, saying about these studies. They were done about remote viewing. Using the standards applied to any other area of science, is concluded that the psychic functioning has been well established. So they're saying that this is a person of statistics, and this is one of the reasons why I do point to this lecture as well, because what Dean actually does demonstrate is that we all know aspirin, right? We've all seen aspirin where they're like, take this and it'll help reduce your heart attack, right? That's based off a 0.02% effect range. 0.02, it's not even 1%. So that means based on 1,000 people, if they take it while they're having a heart attack, they might get some benefit. Meanwhile, the meta-analysis of this stuff shows an effect range of 38 to 46%. And so they're able to post on their aspirin that effect is real, but we have a problem saying psychic functioning is real? I don't think so. Same thing with this professor of psychology from Oregon. He says the same thing. It's this. There's something there, and this does get into the remote viewing aspect, and this is where I like to delve directly into the SRI remote viewing protocols. Now, this, you can say, is probably the one official recognition of psychic function and psychic application in the military. It's not the only one. It's the only one that's been officially recognized to some degree. Now, even in this official recognition, they discount it. Now, this is one thing that I know I'm not going to be very popular with some of the remote viewing teachers out there, but when they say this program was stopped in 1995, well, they're full of shit. Okay? It never stopped. And in fact, it amplified way more. Okay? What it did is maybe got moved from the Army and then went to private contractors, went to the NSA, went to CIA, DOD, things like that. But it's still going on. But a lot of it originated from the Stanford Research Institute in remote viewing. And so this is Uri Geller right here. This is Ingo Swann, two pivotal figures in, intuition studies in general, but also very key people in developing these protocols. And what these protocols were developed for, or in a sense, a formulaic expression of clairvoyancy. So it's military. So they wanted to be able to take in anyone, any recruits that came in their door, dumb as bricks, whatever, and they wanted to sit them down with a piece of paper and say, just write that comes to that noggin. And then they basically will see that correlate to the target. And they'll utilize that information, because even statistically, out of nowhere, this person, he might have, 9 things that have no pertinence to the target, but that one thing. It's like out of all the things he picked out in the multiverse, he picks out one thing. And so they get that and they correlate it to other views. And that helps formulate a picture. And so some of these picture makers, some people like this man, Joseph McMonagle, he was officially recognized as one of the first government remote viewers. His claim to fame was staying alive in Vietnam in a job that most people don't last more than, I think it was like 3 weeks or something like that. And he was there for a couple of years. And so basically they figured, well, he's either extremely lucky or there's some kind of intuition working there. So they recruited him out of, I believe it was the Army. And so he was one of the remote viewers. His book, Memoirs of a Psychic Spy, goes a little more into detail that, and he actually does have a book on the protocols themselves. And one of the things that I think is funny, and this is how you know that the report about the 1995 disbanding of this thing is just a bunch of crap, because they're saying that none of this was effective. They're saying they weren't getting effective intel. Now, in this book, he does describe how they were very effective at getting intel, including the Russian sub that had the dual hull welded together, the Hunt for October sub. Well, they saw it coming before it came, because they couldn't penetrate whatever the Russians had set up with the satellites to see what was in there. So they used the batch of remote viewers, and they were saying, we're seeing a sub out there in the middle of Siberia, not next to any water. All the brass were saying, you're crazy, there's no water, why would it be there? Well, they started seeing icebreakers, and they started seeing bulldozers, and then weeks later, here they come. Here come the icebreakers, here comes the bulldozers, up goes the hangar, and poof, they birth the big submarine. And then for me personally, what I thought was hilarious in a sense to me was when I was reading this book, because they also talked about the Iran hostage situation, which is really popular right now with the movie that just won all these Academy Awards. Now, yeah, Argo. Okay. And now he talks about this and how they were tasked to follow the hostages. And while doing this and checking on their vitals, seeing if they're okay, if they're being messed with, they started seeing commandos rushing into the compound. And so as they're reporting this, they're just sort of doing their reporting. And this was under, I believe it was a CIA kind of umbrella at the time. So they're reporting to them. And then what I thought was funny is because now another agency thought that there was an intel leak because no one was supposed to know about this operation. What this operation was, this is the fun part. It was one of the first operations of Delta Force. The same people that didn't exist before, right? This book, this man, retired Colonel Charlie Beckwith, talks about the same Iran incident and where they thought they had an intel leak. And he says in there, it turned out to be a secret intel gathering operation with the CIA. So we resumed our normal plan because they were about ready to scrap their whole invasion, everything like that. And it's kind of funny. Obviously, as we know, they weren't really successful in the end, the Delta Force, but they tried really hard. And this actually is what's now recognized as far as the remote viewers in that incident is Operation Grill Flame. Now, I was trying to find the image, but it kind of is hard to track down. You actually see the president holding a dossier that says Grill Flame. That's how people figured this out. That was the intel coming from the viewers. Is what basically what that was. And so here we go. We have military application of psychic function and these remote viewing protocols. Now, Joseph Monacle is a great person to really get a very cut and dry tutorial of how to do this particular modality. Another viewer that was involved in this program was David Morehouse. I do actually recommend his tutelage quite a bit because we do come from a similar place of viewing from a higher point of self, higher self, whatever you want to call it. See, the military, they don't care. They don't care. They just want you to write that data down and report it. And that's the fun thing about both these guys in their accounts too will say how they worked with many nuts and bolts kind of military people who didn't believe in aliens, angels, demons, fairies, and then they have to report and say, an angel blocked me. Yeah. And it's like, what? Yeah, it's like, well, don't know what else to call it. So it happens. It does happen. And if you think about this, and if you think that they know that, it's like, this is what I'm saying, that what they're telling us about the psychic programs is a farce. They're only giving us like, because if we know we're dealing with angels and demons, don't you think the people in charge of them go, wait a minute, maybe we should reevaluate some of these programs and start thinking a little different, figure out how we can exploit this more or stay away from trouble. But instead, we get the Monasteric Goats. We get the Monasteric Goats to kind of talk about the remote influencing programs, like as if they don't work. They're going to stare at this goat and it's going to fall down. No one ever did it. And we disbanded that program in 1995 because we're trying to do remote influencing, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, you have inside recruiting material like Inception going on. Because this is one thing that happens that you'll hear different sources say that they use media and movies to recruit. The show 24, for instance, it's a recruiting tool. Act of Valor is a movie that just came out, this Navy SEALs. It's a recruiting thing because they can't necessarily hand you brochures. Do you want to be a psychic agent with the NSA? They can't do that. So they do stuff like movies, or you'll have sources that come in and say, oh, hey, you might want to try this, or you might want to add this little thing. Now, Inception, the cool thing about Inception to me when I saw this was the fact that, yes, they were sharing a lot of actual information about subconscious travel and remote influencing is kind of what it's called. Like, so the Monasteric Goats concept kind of umbrella that as remote influencing. And so a lot of what they talked about in terms of subconscious defenses, very real, and how to sort of pivot through the different realities as they did. So for those who've seen the movie, kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about with that. And what was the Inception thing? This is one thing I really did like the idea of this whole movie, why at its core, is because when it comes down to it, I'm sure there's a lot of healing practitioners in here, a lot of spiritual guides in here who will know that when you try to exert your will directly too much, you generally have some kind of snapback, some kind of karmatic thing that comes back your way. Some direct manipulation, something's going to happen. So Inception, that's pretty much what they're saying too. Like, we can't just go in there and change his mind. We have to make him think that it's a good idea. Okay, and that, when you think about this is exactly what's going on all the different scales in terms of even like Thunder's technology. Okay, you're asking how we stay alive. Well, they want us to make a really bad choice, a really bad move, and make us believe that we thought of it. Okay, because if you go in and just shoot someone, well, it's pretty easy to figure out something weird just happened there, as opposed to someone making a bad decision. Well, that's what things like Inception is about. It's about, you can say, military operations and industrial espionage on a scale that most people don't even understand. Because, for instance, have we noticed how many of these bankers die of heart attacks or random car crashes or all this other weird things, right? They very rarely get old and die, do they? Okay. Well, there might be some of this going on, some of the Inception work, which is remote influencing and making someone believe something's going on when it really isn't. And moving on here, because the Inception is kind of, more of a, you can say, a natural psychic agent. I mean, there they use drugs to put them to sleep, things like that, which happens. Now, source code. Now, this movie is something that's gone by a lot of people's radar. But what this actually is a state of the technology, according to one of my sources who worked with a lot of this kind of technology, probably about the early 90s is when, but at the end of the movie, what they do. Now, how many of you here have seen this movie? How many have you? Okay, go see this movie. Quick synopsis about it is essentially a military man is sent back in a simulated reality for a duration of 8 minutes to try to figure out how to stop a train bombing. And so what this is pretty much what's going on right now. And this is how this kind of technology is used. And now this does bridge into other whistleblowers' testimony about things like Yellow Book, the Looking Glass projects, and to a degree even some of what Andy was talking about with multidimensional and time jumping and time visitations, because it's this type of technology that's is purposely peering through the multiverse to try to have some kind of applicable result in this reality. And that is something that goes on big time. This is something that most people won't talk about because they either don't know or now know, just I have those sources, I guess. But this is something that goes on. This is a huge project of the NSA, and there's a reason why I'm saying them, because this is the ones that do this kind of stuff, as far as I know right now. And it has to do with timeline manipulation. So I'm sure many healers in here have heard of that on different ways relating to different issues or even different entities. Well, some of them are government. Some of them are, just like how Steve was talking about earlier. Some people are meant to touch a lot of people, and so you can't necessarily kill them, but you can manipulate the hell out of them if they let themselves open to that. And so things like source code, where you're exploring different possible realities and then pretty much influencing from there, these are one of the weapons that they'll use. Okay, not only weapons, because this is the fun part. Because they get these people who are very, very deep into these black projects. And how many have seen the movie Minority Report? Okay, Minority Report, you know how the people were asleep? Okay, it's similar stuff happens in this kind of program. And what they're doing is it'll be things that are somewhat conventional. Find the dirty bomb material. Find this pirated military electronics. Okay, but the thing is, ultimately they call it training because ultimately the NSA is the one who sold those people the dirty bomb material, and then they test their little rat race out. Meanwhile, real bullets, real everything's flying, real people are dying, but they call it training. So one of the applications of this type of technology, and then moving on to what I think most people actually would kind of think of in terms of a psychic agent. And this is the best part about this, and I'm going to push this to the button here, and it's going to show me speed of thought. Now, the reason why I say this is probably one of the best depictions, well, number one, just being experienced for myself, it's probably one of the best on-screen depictions of psychic function. Telepathy, remote influencing, clairvoyancy, all of that. Now, the cool part about this one was, and source code actually, but more cool at this one, because one of my sources who talked a lot about this material came to me one day and was like, hey, you have to see these two movies. My people who are still inside, they said, you need to watch these. And he's like, I watched them. Okay, I understand, whatever, but here, check them out. Now, this movie was there. It was on that list. Now, the funny thing was, I was looking for it, and it wasn't released yet. So, I Netflixed it and found it, okay, online the day it was premiering in Newport Beach, the film festival. So obviously these NSA people knew this movie was coming out. They knew what it was saying. They knew what I was probably going to say, and they wanted me to see it. So that's the fun part about it. Because the interesting thing about this movie from my source was saying that just like Men in Black, because that's the other thing, I actually have been trained in the remote viewing protocols by a Stargate viewer who is colleagues with some of those people. And they kind of say the same thing. It's like, yeah, I know the people they're parodying in there. So like in here, they also talk about the NSA's big pharma company. And that's a whole other beeswax. Well, wax there. It's just huge. Okay. They do utilize drugs for, to help amplify things and all this other stuff. And it's apparently some of the most advanced around. So they mentioned that. They also mentioned the schools. The schools, for those who aren't familiar with that, those are places where they take special children, sometimes by choice, sometimes not. And you're utilized, basically, compartmentalized and utilized. And speed of thought, is one of these movies that they were obviously using as some kind of recruitment tool or disclosure, or whatever it is. But at the same time, I can't really say enough cool things about this because this movie actually depicted a lot of this stuff. Okay, we're told, okay, for instance, same thing with like free energy. They tell us it takes some monumental effort, monumental everything, but a lot of times it doesn't. And some of us have seen it demonstrated. Same thing with remote influencing. They'll tell us, it takes some monumental effort or information transfer, for that matter. Telepathic information transfer, no, it doesn't. You just kind of have to know how to synchronize. And so this is one of the movies that actually shows the synchronizations. And it's funny to me, when I saw this the first time, I'm just like, yes, this is perfect, because this is just a quick animation. If it plays. Okay, didn't play. Um,
Yeah, I can do it at the
might have to do it. It's just a quick information. Well, I can just demonstrate. I can just kind of say what's going on here anyways. Okay, how she has a drink in her hand, he has an empty glass. Okay, what they're doing is they're synchronized in a psychic environment. This is in both of their heads while they're communicating, sitting in another location. And so what happens is she brings up these two glasses and here, have a drink on the beach here. And she's like, oh, you never had this drink before? And he's like, no, that's why his glass is empty right there. And so what she does, she reaches over and touches the glass and it fills up. And he's like, because it's psychic, so he tastes it in his mind. And he's like, wow, how'd you do that? And she's like, one of the things I'm learning how to do. Now, see, even in this movie, they're trying to say how it's very difficult, can't do this, blah, 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 blah. But I'm sure there's some people maybe in the audience who've had a shared dream, or I'm sure you've had telepathic experiences, thinking about a friend and then they call on your cell phone. Okay, similar stuff. We're talking about specific information here. And this is one of the things that even the lucid dream state, Joseph McMonagle in my other slide was talking about working with SRI and the Monroe Institute, who specifically focuses on OBEs and lucid dreaming. And what he said is a small part in the book, and I can understand why. But he said if the hardest part about remote viewing while lucid dreaming is attaining the lucid dreaming state. But once you're there, the results are quote unquote astounding. So what he didn't really want to say was that you could pretty much see everything through all possible realities at the same time right there, as opposed to some of these, the way you view through the normal protocols, because they're very, very particular. And so either way, we have it has a demonstrating telepathic information exchange. Now, this is the one that honestly kind of triggered me a little bit when I first saw it, because no one anywhere talks about the mergers. Okay, the mergers of consciousness, with the exception of maybe certain tantric practitioners and teachers, because this is the only way they talk about in public, is unifying your information field with someone else's. Now, on a military application, you're inducing this, okay, because you need to know everything in their head, because it's espionage at its worst. Okay, it's not just I'm going through your trash. You know, I'm watching you. No, it's like I know everything you did from when you were a kid and why you're so ashamed about whatever this and that on you, or why you do this, because you're assimilating that field and you're in there and you're them as much as they are you, as much as you're allowing in. And so this is one of the movies that actually talk about this in pretty good detail. And this is a very huge thing, because this is, in a sense, one of the most powerful ways we can exchange information and energy at the same time while being spiritually connected to basically everything. So this is why you hear certain tantric practitioners, certain people talking about this, or even couples who will talk about having spontaneous mergers, how just different about things because of this, because it does connect you. It changes you. You see a lot of things different, and you recognize how much information we can exchange and how limitless we really are. And so as this movie crammed a lot of things into it. There's even stuff I didn't get a chance to get into because we don't have enough time. So I highly recommend this one. Can't say enough cool things about it. So that being said, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you guys all the SRI remote viewing protocols in one quick shot, hot psychic injection. So it's pretty simple. You know, this is the funny thing about it. And see, there's a difference between clairvoyancy and remote viewing. Now, a lot of people are going to hear, "Oh, I remote view." It's like, oh, no, you probably don't. Okay, because the remote view, basically, what's going to happen. And if you have pencils and paper, feel free to join in. And usually, what you want to do is you want to have a blank, lineless sheet of paper, and you're going to, in a sense, mentally, don't actually draw the lines on there. You're going to separate your paper 3 different sections, okay? You have the analytic overlay,